in the guise of a miracle. Let's see, how do I go down here? Is that it? No. Hold on, I'm struggling to change slides.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to repeat that last line. The new, therefore, always appears in the guise of a miracle. So,
Oops. Okay, well, that's how you do it. All right. Okay, great. So, yes, so it's real easy to get ourselves in a box and think that nothing new is going to happen, that, oh my gosh, look at this piece of bad news and that piece of bad news. But our experience over decades is that people are extremely creative, and that often when it seems darkest, perseverance pays off. And and we can't see always ahead of time when that breakthrough occurs. You know, in Utah, there is this town, Blanding, yes. They tunneled through that mountain for their water supply, which is very inspiring. And it took a long time through solid rock. Okay, this is a list of arms control treaties. You could make another list, but this is more or less the list. And some are more important than others. And these are live links for the most part. And you can easily look them up for details. I'm going to zero in on a few of these, just a few. And I used these particular references, but there are others. So an important date coming up is less than a year away, which is the expiration of the New START Treaty. And at that time, there will be no treaty between the United States and any other nuclear weapon state on the size of nuclear arsenals and pretty much anything. Anything specific and definite. And in this talk, I am emphasizing the possibility of a new treaty, which appears to us at this time almost inevitable. For reasons which it's not because we want the treaty, it's because we're being forced into the treaty. Okay, nuclear weapon-free zones are a little bit neglected, as there are 5 nuclear-free zone treaties. They involve the countries shown here. The Pentagon is concerned enough about them to make this graphic. And one of our former interns, Michael Spies, went on to great things at the United Nations and wrote this beautiful paper here on a discussion of the comparative strengths and weaknesses of the 5 nuclear weapon-free zone treaties for disarmament. And we put that on our website this afternoon so you could get it. So question that I would ask is, could the countries of the global south, or if you prefer to say the non-nuclear weapon states, which are not allied with nuclear weapon states, either strengthen, expand, or extend these treaties? That is, expand the number of states parties, or could the gaps in the treaties be strengthened somehow? Which of course would require opening them, which is scary. Or could some of the better features of these treaties be brought into the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at, say, the meeting, one or more meetings of the states parties, one of which is going to happen next month. I want to highlight here before leaving this slide the important problem of extended deterrence, which is really a can of worms. It is the way that non-nuclear weapon states really participate in the activities of the nuclear weapon states. And this is nearly entirely a problem generated by the United States. Now, Belarus has Russian nuclear weapons now. That's very recent. And I think maybe Kazakhstan, there's that relationship with Russia, but all the rest, 30 or more, are US allies under our nuclear umbrella.
I know that your timer only says 13 minutes left, Greg.
Uh-oh,
But I just want to
moving fast.
Yeah, real
Okay.
quick, just you will, I mean, we'll have a copy of this later for those who are only on telephone to be able to see these images. We don't have to spend much time describing the images, just
Yeah,
being
okay.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay, so the NPT is a very important treaty, and just because it's old doesn't mean it's not important. And the violations of the NPT are increasing, not decreasing, and it is a US law, domestic law as well as treaty. So there's violations of Article 6 and Articles 1 and 2. And because the adherence to the treaty is, oopsie, almost universal, it creates a norm. Now, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is frequently looked to as something which makes nuclear weapons illegal, but it really doesn't do that. The US and its adversaries, rivals, whatever, have not signed and really will never sign the TPNW. So I think we need to disabuse ourselves of the idea that the US is ever going to join that treaty. And because the US is never going to join it, and because the US has said flat out that we do not accept that this creates any customary law norm, it just doesn't make nuclear weapons illegal. For some states which are enjoy, in quotes, extended deterrence relationships, if they joined, yes, it would undermine extended deterrence. And again, if the treaty were changed, it could get tough on nuclear weapon states. Already there's one or two features which are a little tough. But it's more of a non-proliferation treaty. And we think here, we at the study group think that by that it diverts the idealism of the anti-nuclear movement into a venue which will be unproductive. Now I want to bring up a treaty that doesn't exist, but has to exist because the Ukraine war cannot go on very much longer, because Ukraine is defeated and the US and NATO are being defeated in Ukraine. And so the beginning of the end of that war is already at hand. Today, Secretary of State Rubio met with Foreign Minister Lavrov in Saudi Arabia, and Trump and Putin have already talked, and more is coming. We don't know what is coming, but something's coming. The old style arms control is not going to happen because Russia in particular thinks the US is completely untrustworthy, and it does take trust. And in order to end this conflict, it's going to require big changes in NATO, extended deterrence, European relationships with Russia and with the United States. Some things are going to happen suddenly. They already are. At the Munich Security Conference, a lot of things started happening, and some will take a long time. And European leadership is going to change. And US attitudes need to change. And all of this is very worthy, we think, of political investment. The main barrier to nuclear disarmament is Russophobia and the conflict relationship we have with Russia right now. So where might we go other than that from here? So here's a few ideas. The nuclear weapons business is extremely wasteful, and a lot of it is quasi-fraudulent. You could consider it to be a money laundering operation. And exposing that, it remains very valuable, more valuable than ever. And so that requires research and writing. In addition, people in Utah have Mike Lee is really important because he is aligned with President Trump, and he is a person who is in the past called for cutting wasteful programs, and he can be a leader in that area. I don't know anything about John Curtis, but he is your other senator, as you know a lot more about him than I do. Now, what could be a good target? Well, Sentinel program on our website, which you see there, and on in our letters and bulletins, there's more bad news for the Sentinel program than has yet really been talked about in the mainstream media. The main problems are coming in the civil works portion, that's the silos. And there's problems with pit production, plutonium warhead core production for the Livermore W87-1 warhead, which is the so-called bonus warhead for Sentinel. They already have enough warheads, but this would be additional warheads for Merving Sentinel to break out of the new START limitations on number of deployed warheads. In Utah, there are very important sites, especially Hill Air Force Base, in the Sentinel program, as you know better than me. And obviously, it would be really great if groups, if people in Utah were able to liaise with like-minded groups in the ICBM states. You know, most of the opposition to nuclear weapons comes from progressive circles or from the coasts. And there's a very limited amount of interaction in the upper north, in the northern tier where the ICBMs actually are. And I think it could be extremely fruitful to talk to people and out of not the usual suspects. And Livermore, California is in a way an ICBM state, and so is New Mexico. It's a huge program. We're talking $200 billion. The usual number you see in the press is 130, but it's really closer to 200 billion for sure. And the we just heard a couple of weeks ago that the Minuteman IIIs will be deployed into the 2050s. This is going to take an enormous amount of time because, as a person on Capitol Hill told me after a briefing, that very few of the missile silos will be able to be reused. Now, it's going to be the political right, which is the more powerful force. A lot of analysis has already been done, and that's all very good. But the people who are going to carry the ball to the military and to the budget hawks are going to be on the political right. So we mustn't be shy. And the obviously, Pegasus and you all are very experienced campaigners, so you have your own ideas there. I just jotted down two of them. Oopsie. So this whimsically entitled National Center for Disarmament Education, that's us. We have so many nuclear weapons things here in the state that we want to open up our doors and have visitors and help people however we can. And we have our own programs which need a ton of help. We're really front and center here with the investments going on in pit production. And of course, you want to build your organizational strength. This mutual security treaty, whatever it is, we need to learn, communicate, and demonstrate support for peace in Ukraine, because that's how we get to disarmament. Absent better relations with Russia, we get nowhere. This is just to inspire you. This is the historic budget for warheads. This red dashed line is the general trend. And we had a in-depth conversation with GAO. We all agree that NNSA does not have enough money for what it wants to do, or phrased upside down, NNSA, the warhead agency, is trying to do way too much with the money it has. And they don't know, most of us have no idea where this money would come from. It made really a lot more money than they now have. And more money than they have said they will need up to this point. Here's the budget for Los Alamos Lab. And you can see it too is taken off. It's now about 5.2. This was made last year. So basically the entire nuclear weapons business, we could do this for other things too, is budgetarily speaking, it's taken off like crazy, and yet there's a lot of problems. So this is a table from NNSA, and it discusses some of the risks that they face. And we don't have time to talk about all this or others, but there is a lot of risk that the nuclear weapons industry is facing, not just in Sentinel, but in pit production and elsewhere. It's very fragile. Not everybody wants to spend their lives making nuclear weapons. And so there's is there human capital gaps? Yeah, that's how they put it. And let's see here. I got 2.5 minutes. We have to integrate, skipping down to a bullet near the bottom. We have to integrate what we do in our broader efforts to make a more humane and resilient society, because we're going to have economic crises and climate crises, just to pick two, and those result in social crises. And so we're going to have to be resilient and basically enlightened. Sorry to say, just to put it blunt, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just giving you the stuff from the shoulder here. We have to transcend our the suffering that we're going to see. I know you're probably already way ahead of Los Alamos Study Group in all this, but we have to go there. And this was from a talk to some young people who were more protesting, and they were kind of on the far left. And I think this is the first time they'd ever heard about a lot of these things, about the importance of simplicity and fostering a range of skills so they can help take care of themselves and others. And for them, being conservative of traditions and building on them was a piece of new information. And so I think that's it. And that's yep.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that quick overview. I have a few questions, but I'd like to let Andy go first if you have a question. Are you able to? Oh, I think Andy's still muted. And also Doug is wasn't able to see those things, but Doug's unmuted on the telephone.
Can you hear me?
I hear Andy. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah. Did I hear some noise that both Trump and Putin may be interested in the START, renewing the START treaty? Is that
you may have. I haven't heard anything this, but I may be a few hours behind. That's how fast things are developing.
Yeah.
Trump said that we don't need to make new nuclear weapons. We have too many. Any use of nuclear weapons would probably be oblivion, I think was his quote. And he also talked about, and he throws things on the wall as part of a negotiating strategy, but he also believes that we're spending too much money on defense. He proposed to Putin and Xi that defense budget be cut in half.
Yeah.
And that was serious enough that defense stocks crashed.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What crashed? What?
Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, their stock value crashed like 5, 6, 7%, something like that on Trump's statement. The market didn't like it. The market took it somewhat seriously.
At least for a minute or a day or a week, perhaps.
Yeah.
As you said, that they focusing on the TPNW for us activists in campaigning against nuclear weapons tends to be a dead end, and it diverts energy. But what about, just curious, is there any possibility that the allied countries like Germany that are holding U.S. nukes, that any of them might have the what do you call it, ovaries or testicles, whatever kind of or non-genderized term about like where they're going to get the courage to would they ever, and would that be, if they did, would that be helpful?
Yes, so that's I think a possibility. We really, all these things, it seems like the merry-go-round, you miss the getting on the merry-go-round. And then so he goes around again, and it's been 15 years or so since it seemed like the last chance of that. But right now, Europe is reeling, their heads are spinning over what they're being told by Trump and Vance, and what's happening in Ukraine, and the rebellion in their own societies against this warlike stance that their leaders have. And where this goes, I'm not sure, but I think that there's an opening.
Yeah.
I think it's worthy of helping however we can manage to do it.
Okay. Another question I wanted a clarification on was, you said it's just one of those money number things, 200 billion on the ground-based strategic deterrence. Over how much time, as opposed to the 130 figure that a lot of people hear?
Right.
How much time is that's not just this year's budget? That's like 20 years or something.
That's the total acquisition cost.
Okay.
That's my estimate of a minimum. And where do I get that? So the 131 that you read is actually several years back dollars. So there was that what was it called, where the budget review was triggered. So because but to make that comparison between the original estimate, both of those dollar figures are expressed in same year dollars. So the 131 is dollars from I think 23 or 22. So if you inflate that to today, it's something like 170. And then you add in the bad news for the program that they're going to be deploying Minuteman IIIs until the early 50s. And thus they're going to have what the general said, what I heard her say was 15 years of overlap between Sentinel and Minuteman III. Well, that means they won't start deploying Sentinel until roughly 2037 instead of 2030. So originally gosh dang, that's a major delay, and they're going to have double the price because they have to maintain the old while building the new and operating and maintaining the new. And it is going to be ghastly expensive. And plus, now that it's taking long, they're going to have to renegotiate some of the land agreements with farmers and ranchers for the thousands of miles of cable that has to be put through their lands. They have to get easements. And then these ranchers and farmers are having to give up the income from wind turbines and other things because they can't have the wind turbines spinning in their radar because they can't see people that might be attacking, So,
Wow.
so the delay creates a lot of extra problems and a lot of extra costs. And I personally think that the economy of the United States will not withstand it.
Yeah.
Did you ever read the defense posture document that was published, I think in August of last year, where the study group proposed that our Defense Department should be able to conduct a war in the Middle East and a nuclear war with China and Russia. And I wonder whether that document ever was reviewed by Congress or new administration.
There's let's see, on our website I'm trying to think which document. So there was a strategic let's see, the Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That one was fall of 23, and it was reviewed, and it is very hawkish. And then there were others, like from Heritage Foundation, that were even more hawkish. And the status of those, they're not quite so official, but they're out there and they're being lobbied. So,
and we don't know how much acceptance there is by Trump.
I think we're getting the clue that not much for the more hawkish ones. I get the impression that Mr. Trump is quite skeptical of that, and I think they're terrified. I think that the military-industrial complex and nuclear weapons business is terrified of Elon Musk also.
And I assume that Gabby, who's now the head of our security thing, she has been opposed to this nuclear arms race, and I wonder whether she has Trump's ear. I'm hoping.
Yes, me too. And we're sure that she does have Trump's ear every single day now.
Is that right? Oh, yeah.
She's the official one that crafts, to the extent that she's capable. And I don't know what her staff is. I don't know how this works up close and personal, but she's the person who is the conduit from all of the intelligence agencies to Trump, supposedly.
Okay.
Greg, earlier you showed a slide about LANL, the Los Alamos lab, and I was wondering how does that compare if you have to Livermore? You know, if you got a sense of the future is for both of those labs, you know.
LANL's about twice the size of Livermore right now, or maybe somewhere between 50 and 100%. It's so annoying that the employment figures are so squirrely that sometimes they include contractors, sometimes they don't. And what are you really seeing? So Los Alamos has 19,000 employees now. And they're heading to more than 20,000. And we think this is nuts, and it's going to be difficult for the road system to sustain it. They're bleeding 800 to 900 employees per year. So people come, they're hired, and they say, oh no, this is not for me. And then they leave.
When I first got involved with the nuclear abolition in the 90s, I was thinking mostly because of the Franciscans I was connected with about the Nevada test site, the Nevada National Security Site, it's currently called. And then I learned more about Los Alamos and Livermore, and then eventually about Sandia, of course. Do you happen to know how many people are employed in Nevada at the nuclear test site?
I don't offhand,
because I know a lot of people are concerned in Utah because of part of that, regardless of the exact number, the concern a lot of Utahns have is the potential for the resumption of nuclear testing, and that's a more direct question.
Okay. Their site profiles, if you go to this is so buried in our website, but you can find it probably in various places, but on our homepage, on our detailed homepage on the left, there's something called NNSA Planning and Budgeting Documents. And so click there and you get the page with a lot of detail. You look for stockpile stewardship and management plans. And each one in the back, and some are more detailed than others, they have site profiles, which have a lot of information about how many employees and how many employees are leaving. And because from their perspective, this business of employee retention is a crisis. So the feds want to know all about that. So you can find that information there. I don't think, so not everybody thinks this, but for really what I believe are very strong reasons, I don't think the United States will ever do nuclear testing again in the conventional sense. And because they get so much data from their expensive tests, which are so heavily instrumented, and they just love them more. And so they don't need to test.
But yeah, thanks. That's a good clarification, especially, I mean, you might have changed in 25 years, but I remember a quote from you in one of my videos. I remember so much from videos I've made where you said that the weapons are stewarding the scientists, you know, was the way that is happening psychologically, morally, et cetera,
politically,
yeah. But it's not so much the need for full-scale nuclear explosions as much as the science and the weapons that are stewarding the scientists and keeping people interested in those jobs. So I in a nutshell, what you're saying is there's probably, if I'm understanding right, there will not be any more nuclear explosions that the United States is doing in Nevada because the science is thorough enough to keep the scientists satiated in terms of their, I'd call it an unholy affection for, destruction.
Yes. And the other thing is that if the United States began nuclear testing, then it would politically liberate other countries to do the same. We don't really have anything to gain. They do. So what we're doing in Nevada is like super expensive. Like we're building a $10 billion machine over there underground. And even Russia can't do that. So.
Right, until we all, and we're still doing it because we haven't gone bankrupt financially as a country yet, but.
Yes, right, we're working on it.
Yeah, nuclear weapons may be, it's been the cornerstone of national policy for a while, and it may be the cornerstone of the death of our economy in general if we keep worshiping them in that way.
And it looks like Musk and his gang have not yet looked at this whole nuclear industry to see whether they could cut the staff there like they're trying to do with so many different agencies in the federal government. So, and you guys have worried about them laying off half the staff?
No, we don't worry about it. We would love it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of, well, I got an email from, I can't say, from a prominent nuclear abolition group leader who said that she said she was appalled that so many nuclear abolition people were clutching their pearls over Trump saying that he wanted to pursue nuclear disarmament and his own way rather than following initiatives which they have proposed. And evidently we're in agreement with her that we have to take the gift horses which are given us, and we know that I don't think NNSA should exist as an agency, even if we had nuclear weapons. When Pegasus early when you were working on this at the beginning, all this was being done in the Department of Energy. And they hadn't yet created NNSA, and they did that in order to make themselves more powerful advocates, have a direct line to the president, have less transparency. And it's an agency which shouldn't exist even if we had nuclear weapons. So I don't care if half the people are laid off and the programs are crippled. I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, and it reminds me of I think Joanna Macy talked about a Buddhist scholar talked about the need for the guardianship project of the future for 100 or 200 years from now and beyond. Once our country is gone, and how do we take care of this poison fire? And currently, there is those nuclear agencies in the United States and some other countries that are de facto guardians of trying to keep people out from getting in and doing worse things with it than they're already doing with it.
Mhm.
But so it's a terribly messy situation right now. The morality is not to protect the planet or creatures or humans, but in general, as a widespread thing. But there is a limited amount of trying to keep the radiation and nuclear materials from getting out into the alleged wrong hands.
Mhm.
But at some point, hopefully in my lifetime, I'm almost 60 years old at this point, that in our lifetimes soonish, people will be envisioning and finding ways to transition into this next phase where there are people working on the guardianship projects, so to speak, for the next several thousand years to make sure that this stuff doesn't keep causing problems for life as much as our scientists are allowed to do. So that would be an exciting field for me to understand about, or who's working on that right now. Obviously there's no money for it because all the money in the United States, we talked about that. Anyway, so another thing I wanted to bring up real quickly before we finish tonight and go on with just a regular meeting for UCAN is the idea of treaties being the supreme law of the land. Is one thing we've said as activists at times, going to court after doing nonviolent civil resistance, saying, we're upholding international law or upholding that kind of law. That's one of the ideas, tactics, because the US Constitution, which still exists in some way, is being disrespected, obviously, by the executive branch. But the idea that treaties have a value in some people's minds and could have an effectiveness. So, Greg, thank you for talking about these treaties tonight. And thank you for that idea about that. I don't know if you made it up or if where you got about the future treaty in Europe that needs to be happening.
No, I didn't make it up. It's actually being talked about right now, and it will involve sooner or later will involve nuclear weapons. That's it's really the elephant in the room, and a substantial part of why there is a war in Ukraine is because Russia saw very clearly that, as Putin put it, if Ukraine joins NATO, it's a dagger at our throat or our heart, whichever he said. And it's a nuclear dagger if Ukraine were to join NATO. And they could not, any leader over there, it'd be like putting nuclear missiles in Juarez. No, nobody's going to allow that.
Yeah. And so you may have mentioned it before. Sorry if I missed it. It's probably in the recording, but can you say again, for my sake, anybody else that's listening right now, what is the point group, the point person who's working on that treaty? Because some people care about treaties, and that's why we're having a meeting tonight.
Right.
What is the entity that's doing
Sure. I do want to make sure that you see that I agree that treaties are very important, and that the basic idea that treaties are the supreme law of the land is really important, and it's good. I don't want to suggest in any way that that's not really important. And the NPT remains really the bedrock, and along with some other treaties which aren't specifically nuclear weapons, but like international humanitarian law treaties, which we're also signed up to. But so who's the point person in this? Well, point person at that is Donald Trump, and for the treaty which doesn't exist. So we have Donald Trump, we have Marco Rubio, we have Keith Kellogg, his special envoy. Keith Kellogg seemed to have fallen out of favor briefly. We have Elon Musk. But all of this, I was recently at a conference, we were talking about policy of making plutonium pits, who makes that policy, and the answer from a person who was previously very high in NSA said that policy is made by the president, nobody else. It's not made by underlings. And that is nothing compared to a treaty with Russia. So that is going to Trump's desk. But people like Mike Lee and other people who are important leaders in Trump's majority in Congress, they will be influential.
So that treaty that has no name yet, that's being worked on, is European based, but the point people are in the U.S.
Well, physically they are part of this government, but they were discussing it in Saudi Arabia today.
Okay.
And Saudi Arabia is hosting talks.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks again so much for all the information, and also making these slides available later, or at least
We'll post them on our website. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much, and we look forward to seeing you in other places in the flesh.
All right.
Yay.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Andy.
So stay tuned to our YouTube channel for more of these kinds of events in the future. And you can always contact us at the Utah Campaign to Abolish Nuclearism at